morning, the cloudy sky heralded rain. Suddenly, there was a heavy downpour, thunderclaps, and lightning flashed, but the summer rain slowly gave way to a flying wind that quickly dispersed the clouds. As they fled, they cleared the heavenly space for the rays of the already rising sun. Alexei Nikolaevich opened his eyes. His wife was still asleep, sweetly smacking her lips. He looked at the beautiful face of his beloved wife. How beautiful she is! I love you so much. Alexei Nikolaevich's first wife passed away 5 years ago from asthma. Attempts to save her were unsuccessful. She could not give birth to children. Knowing that her husband was healthy and his desire to have children made the guilt and her shattered health even worse. A CT foray. As a student before she met Alexei, she had an abortion and ate home secret, and here its consequences. Infertility. She did not confess to her husband for a long time. Then she became ill. Her asthma progressed and her confession was no longer needed. Before she died, she confessed to her husband about infertility and on the endless lie. She justified herself by the fact that she loved him very much. She asked forgiveness, knowing that neither he nor God would forgive her sin. Alexei Nikolaevich, becoming a widower, wondered if he loved his wife. He couldn't find an answer. Why did she lie for so long? He would have understood, but she made a mistake when she was young. Everything can be forgiven, but not the lies. She was gone, and all that was left in his soul was emptiness. The years flew by like a whirlwind. No children, and he's not a boy. But short relationships with women did not bring him happiness. Akim, none of them became his own and close in spirit. He recently turned 44. Just more than 2 years ago, he met a woman on a train on his way back from a business trip, 8 years younger than himself. Beautiful, charming, cheerful, with a sense of humor, she somehow immediately fell into his heart. She lived nearby, but in another city. They met for 4 months. He came to see her, and she came to see him. Alexei fell in love with Tatiana, her name, and soon he proposed to become his wife. He knew that he liked her, but he unexpectedly received a refusal. Tatiana, knowing his past life, said, "I'm sorry, but I can't deceive you. I was married. I fell on the ice as a child. They saved. I was sick, and as a consequence of this cold, I cannot have children. However, that was not the reason we separated from my husband. He loved vodka more than me." Tatiana's confession puzzled the man, but 2 weeks later he proposed to her again. "I guess I'm not destined to have children, and it's too late. I fell in love with you. Thank you for telling the truth. How do you feel about me? Tell it like it is." Tatiana put her arm around Alexei's shoulders and said, "I love you too, to be honest. I've never known true love in my life. It's up to you." They got married for almost 2 years. They had been together. Alexei believed that Tatiana was his destiny. The clock struck 7 o'clock in the morning. Tatiana, opening her eyes, stretched sweetly with a smile on her face and kissed her husband. "Are you awake?" "No, I kept looking at you and admiring you. How lucky I am to have you." Later in the evening, Alexei Nikolaevich flew away on a business trip to Moscow. Working as chief engineer at an aircraft factory, he had special authority and possessed unrivaled prestige. Tatiana worked as a psychologist in the same firm. Thus, all day long, she fed her husband, cooking him various delicacies. The doorbell rang. Tatiana opened the door and saw her friend Alexei. He is the head of the technical department of the aircraft factory. Alexei was surprised and asked, "Did something happen?" The cheerful and clever Peter replied, "Don't sweat it. There are some questions on the way to the airport. We'll discuss it. I let your car go. Let's go in my Jeep and we'll talk at the same time. I hope you don't mind." "No," Alexei replied, "except we kind of talked about it." "Okay, come on down. I'll be right out." Alexei said goodbye to his wife and kissed her, promising she'd be back soon. "Okay, honey, I'll be waiting. I love you," he called when he went to the landing. "Bye, sweetheart." "Okay, I will." The door closed. Stepping outside, Alexei got into the Jeep. "Let's go. So what's up?"
Peter began to clarify some questions on the blueprints one more time so Alexei wouldn't forget.
"Friend, you're my sweetheart." Alexei replied, "What's the matter with you? You know I'm perfectly trained. I've been on my job a long time. You're testing me like a schoolboy."
"Oh, Yaroshka, it's nothing. I just thought I'd see you off."
"What are you, my young lady?"
"Oh, it's this miracle." Already at the airport, Peter really worried like a girl that it was more than half an hour before registration. "I'll speak already," said mockingly, and even with a bit of a smile.
"Alexei, you'll turn in your ticket. We'll call in sick, and I'll fly instead. You know, I ate my job too. Well, maybe a smaller one than yours. Next, you call your wife. You tell her you're flying. You'll be at the airport for another 3 hours. Maybe less. Go to a restaurant, have a drink, calm down, and then take a cab home. Without telling anyone. Now, the important thing is to remember, I'm your friend. I give my head for you. You know that. I just can't keep quiet any longer. I know exactly where and how I got the news. I won't tell you. Tonight your wife has a date with a pilot. He's coming to her house. I've hinted to you before that she's quite free in general, not with men. But you wouldn't listen? Ready to tear me to shreds rather than believe me? A lot of people at the plant are gossiping about your wife's infidelity. That some have seen her with a civilian man, others with a pilot. Give me more than one. I can't have your name being blabbed about by gossips. You're a well-known man in T-Town, and that talk has got to stop. It's been going on for over 6 months now. You know, when I got the tape of the pilot talking to your wife on the phone, I stopped having doubts. Trust but verify, and the popular saying goes, if I'm lying, do what you want with me. You can spit in my face and smash my face in. I can take it all, but I want you to handle it. I don't want to hurt you. You have a key to the apartment. You'll come in quietly after 1 o'clock in the morning? Key to the apartment. You'll figure the rest out for yourself. Please, please be patient. Please. Peter was silent. Alexei was silent. And then he said quietly, have you gone mad? What kind of games are these? Well, I don't believe it. I see how she treats me. She is sincere. Even in bed, she constantly talks to me about love and is glad that I met her. I can't imagine for a moment that she could lie so skillfully. That's some bullshit. Go to hell. The announcer announced check-in for the flight leaving for Moscow. Alexei stood up, checked in his ticket, and turned back to Peter. Go on, leave. I'm waiting, or we'll have a fight. Do you understand me? Peter, leaning back in his armchair, understood that Alexei was already blown away by this news, and now he had to go home to check it out. So Peter, as I understand you have a ticket for this flight. Peter, in his heart, understood everything. He could even imagine himself in his place. It really was difficult for a decent man to understand and accept such a challenge, even more so to go spying. Alyoshka, you forgive me, time will tell. If you are not ready today, fly to Moscow. He patted his friend on the shoulder, wishing him a soft landing, and left. Squeezing his head with his hands, Alexei desperately did not want to believe in his wife's betrayal. But his thoughts were confused. He felt a wild pain in his chest. After taking a pill, he realized that the stone had been cast, and it was not so easy to catch it and throw it out of his heart. The plane boarding was announced. Alexei sat in his chair. But in a few minutes, the announcer announced the name of the late passenger who had checked in and invited him to board. Alexei, not unclasping his hands, lowered his head and continued to sit. What to do? I won't be able to work in Moscow in peace. Birdie thoughts eat my brain. I dialed my wife's number on the phone, confirmed in a calm voice. That's it, I'm flying, bye. Hearing his wife's joyful voice, wishing him a happy journey. Alexei sat in the waiting room for over 2 hours. He never gave up his ticket. He sent it out into the street. Rain was drizzling again, covering the pavement with a wet film of water, in which the glare of the color of the burning lanterns was reflected. But the air, soaked with the freshness of the rain, seemed to soothe my face. My head ached terribly. Vexed voiced the same question. What to do? Inside, the mind told me, go home. Vex the soul protested. You do not want this truth. Are you afraid of it? But still, something must be done. Stupidly, his mind kept saying. Alexei took a cab and drove home, climbing up to the 5th floor of a house built back in Stalinist times. It was with high ceilings, with columns and various stucco decorations. He stopped on the landing. My heart was pounding. The veins on his temples throbbed. For more than half an hour, he stood at the door, but there was no point in waiting any longer. Quietly, he entered the hallway. I saw other men's shoes standing there. Gathering all his will into a fist, he ordered himself, I am calm. I am calm. Now all he needed was self-control. It was as if his face was petrified. The extinguished gaze was free of any emotion. Alexei understood. Above all, calm equanimity, hidden contempt, no hysteria. That would be the hardest blow, like a knockout. But the thoughts frightened him. Anger boiled over, jealousy and anger, but no, it wasn't mine. I know what to do. He put on his soft slippers and walked into the living room. The round table, set for the evening meal, had an unsightly appearance. There an open bottle of unfinished cognac, a bottle of champagne now drunk, rested on the table. Beautiful plates with leftovers nestled next to the bottles. Attached on one of the chairs hung a military pilot's shirt and tunic. On another chair, carelessly tossed, was my wife's beautiful Chinese robe. Roses in a vase and a beautiful box of chocolates decorated the coffee table. They were gone when I left. Except wistfully, the man made his way to the kitchen. Archway decorated with moldings connected it to the dining room, and he sat down on a chair trying to gather his thoughts. He returned a little later to the living room, gathered up the dirty dishes, took them to the kitchen, washed them, put them on a towel, came in again, took the pilot's clothes, carefully cleaned, ironed, and hung them on a chair in the living room. I cooked pictures in the living room. In the hallway, he cleaned his shoes and put them next to his clothes. His wife's robe was neatly ironed and hung next to the men's clothes. But quietly stepping on the soft carpet, he came to the bedroom door, opened it a little, and saw the couple in love in each other's arms. As not made of Chinese silk, they barely covered their bodies. There was a mask of pleasure and complete satisfaction on the lovers' faces. His wife's shamelessness threw him off balance. It was as if the devil had possessed Alexei's body, obscured his eyes, plugged his ears, and turned him into a stone monster. Butting the door, Alexei headed into the kitchen. Tired, he sat down on a chair, his thoughts leaving his mind. An emptiness was silent inside. It was as if he was chained to the chair. His tongue no longer obeyed him. It seemed to Alexei that life was dying inside him. The wall clock showed 3 o'clock in the morning. It was time for a sound sleep and amazing dreams. Outside the window, the dawn was just barely glimmering. Into the mysterious darkness, reluctantly but slowly receded. He opened the fridge and took out the necessary products for breakfast. Within an hour, the prepared breakfast was waiting for the guests in the dining room, where the rich aroma of brewed coffee was already wafting. Coffee poured into cups stood on a tray. Alexei, taking the tray with the coffee, made his way to the bedroom. Quietly entering, he approached the rest, spoke louder than usual. "Please hurry up. Your clothes are cleaned and ironed in the living room. I am waiting for you in the dining room for breakfast." When he opened his eyes, the wife and her lover were still asleep. The wife and her lover looked perplexed at the man in front of them. Probably interrupted deep sleep did not allow them to think at once. What had happened? Where did the husband come from in the bedroom? Have a cup of coffee? It will cheer you up. He walked quietly out the bedroom door. It's hard, and there's no reason to tell about the shock that swept the couple in love over their heads. Half an hour later, both, first the pilot, then the wife, appeared in the doorway of the dining room. But supporting the state of the lovers was no less shocking than in the bedroom. "Please come to the table. It's early breakfast time. I think you're hungry. Honey, have a cup of coffee. Would you like to drink coffee in the morning? I made it just the way you like it. Please come to the table. Everything's hot. Eat up. Here's coffee, croissants warmer, just heated in the microwave. Enjoy your meal." The impenetrable face of Alexei, as if dressed in a stone mask, calmly looked at his wife and the man. Aita, the pilot, as a man of manly profession, did not fuss. He was mostly silent, realizing that no words could explain his presence here. He sat down at the table and decided to have breakfast. His wife, without a single drop of blood on her pale face, looked frightened at her husband. It was as if she was speechless. Looks only her thoughts were frantically scrolling in her head. Why was he silent? Why was he silent? He could yell at me, call me a whore, hit me, but he doesn't say anything. It's maddening. I've never been afraid of him. Why is it now I'm overwhelmed with unbearable terror? My heart is covered with ice. Every cell of my body trembles with fear, for I do not know what will happen next. I'm shivering and I'm scared. What's the matter, dear? Don't you want coffee? I tried for you. Drink it, he said sharply and insistently. Yet with a trembling hand, she took the cup and began to drink the coffee. Her teeth, like a small hammer, tapped on the edge of the cup. Alexei remained perfectly calm, only inside his thoughts held back his words from spinning and pitying his wife. After finishing his breakfast, the pilot stood up from the table. Thanking Alexei, he asked, "Will you let me leave?" "Ah, of course, you're free to go." Oh, calmly, with an almost invisible chuckle, Alexei replied. The pilot headed into the hallway, pulling the doorknob. It was locked. He returned without going into the dining room. He realized there is no way out through the door. The only way out was through the balcony. The 5th floor is high. Looking up from the balcony, he saw below, almost below him, an iron fence with sharp spears on top. On top, the house was asleep. There was no other way out, mournfully thought the pilot, and gave in on the 4th floor, reached the 3rd floor. Inside, strangely enough, a shiver ruled. The calmness of the host surprised and led him to gloomy thoughts. It would have been better if he had shouted, punched me, insulted me with the last words, thought the pilot. But his ominous silence was worse than torture. My nerves were giving out. Throwing his leg over the balcony, he felt that the edge of the balcony fell off. The leg was unsupported. The other leg had no time to find a secure point. His other hand did not have time to grasp the edge of the balcony. The man instantly flew down and fell on the spears of the railing. He groaned. Cancer's unbearable pain gripped his body, rendering him unconscious. He died of a deep wound that pierced an important organ.
As if she sensed trouble, his wife looked out of the window and saw the outstretched, breathless body of the pilot on the fence. Covering her mouth with her hands, she howled wildly.
The thick walls of the house were impenetrable to sound. She rushed around the room, not knowing what to do. She looked for the phone, but could not find it. The house phone didn't work. Pattering the room from corner to corner, she paced the apartment like a hunted beast. Clutching her temples with her hands, she thought frantically, "Oh my God, what to do? He won't forgive me. How could I invite a lover into my apartment? In my husband's eyes, I see a sentence for myself. Death? It's as if I can hear his words. You've committed a terrible meanness. Let's redeem her?" She said something, addressing her husband, but he did not respond. Alexei sat on a chair in the kitchen, with his head down, unable to hear or see anyone. Tired of futile tossing, desperation, and endless fear, she ran into the bathroom. Opening the door of the bottom drawer of the dressing table, she saw a vial of vinegar essence. Unconsciously, not controlling herself, Being in a semi-collapsed state, she drank half of the vial in one gulp and collapsed on the floor. The savage pain in her throat sealed her fate. Gasping, she wheezed and screamed for help. But there was silence. The walls, impervious to sound, were silent. For a woman with a distorted face was writhing on the floor in agony. Her hands scratched her face in the hope of somehow helping herself. Asked eyes in fear and pain begged for help. A few minutes, and she was no longer screaming. But only a terrible wheeze filled the room with an incomprehensible, desperate sound. The bathroom was empty. Bringing the last groan like a wheeze, she fell silent in a death spasm. Deep, severe pain and shock caused her to stop breathing, and death brought her relief. After a while, Alexei entered the bathroom. He stood with an unconcerned face, looking at his wife's still, beautiful face, now transformed into a disfigured mask. Out of the bathroom, he felt that his legs, as if chained, did not move well. His state numb hands with difficulty dialed on the phone number of an ambulance, then the number of the police. That when he called the address and last name, he muffled. Tom, there was a woman dead in the apartment. A man was dead near the house. And he hung up the phone. He opened the door in the hallway, sat down in a chair, his head splitting apart. X of a tight hoop was whispering a promise to tear his head into small pieces. He leaned against the wall and waited for the ambulance and the police. There was a trial, a judge, the case of convicted A.N. Severgen, which seemed strange and unusual for the first time in 20 years of judicial practice. There was a difficult problem to solve. The judge was a woman. She had to wade through many painful thoughts in her head to dig through many court cases of adultery in the family. But this case did not give a clear answer. What was the verdict? The murder article didn't fit. He hadn't killed. His victims had sentenced themselves. Someone might argue that he had morally encouraged them. But no, during the interrogation of the investigator by the convicted recorded, A.N. Severgen did not hide the fact that when he saw with his own eyes his wife's treason, it was as if he lost his mind. Everything he said confirmed that there could be no violence. He never raised his voice, trying to show his lovers, and above all his wife, by his outward calm and strange silence, that treason and betrayal are a crime against the family. His strange actions, cleaning clothes, breakfast, coffee, and a closed door, were necessary so that the couple, especially the wife, would understand the meanness of what they had done. He could not have foreseen such a tragedy happening to them. Yes, he closed the door, shut off the house phone, took away their cell phones so that they would feel the same agony, the same pain that he had gone through. Of course, after a certain amount of time, he would have let the pilot go and kicked his wife out of the house. But when the tragedy with his wife and her lover had already happened, his help was useless, although he could have sent his wife to the hospital, which he regrets that he did not do, and let her with what she herself had done. With what she herself had done, the most experienced lawyer in the city undertook to defend Severin Ein. The Creole demonstration taken seriously had presented to the court the facts of the past life of the wife of Alexia Nikolai. the former prostitute who served customers for money, was married. The teen ex-husband, after learning that his wife was constantly cheating on him, drank himself to death with grief. Tatiana kicked him out of the apartment onto the street and became homeless, sleeping wherever she could. He was killed in one of the street fights. Dmitri and his wife's legend that she had fallen for the ice as a child and therefore became barren was not confirmed by her relatives. The life as a prostitute had made her infertile. Upon learning these details from her lawyer, Alexei, I was simply shocked. Because he had fallen in love with her, he lost his head and didn't want to know anything. He believed her. She might have wanted to change her life, but her past life was pulling her back into the abyss. It was already akin to a disease. The petition of the enterprises for the accused was a public person. The character references of the Severin enterprise, where he worked with other organizations, characterized him as a worthy, respected, honest, and excellent leader. Witnesses came to his defense, confirming the adultery of his wife, who had been his wife for only 2 years. The depravity of this woman is obvious. The pilot's wife spoke at the trial. Of course, it hurt her, leaving her 2 young children in her arms. But she did not defend her husband, because she guessed about his adultery, and his leaving his mistresses through the balcony for her was no longer news. She thought it was an accident. Maybe God himself had decided to punish the sinner. But before passing judgment, the judge gave the defendant the last word. Alexei Nikolaevich seemed to have aged during his time under investigation. His gray hair and whiskers spoke of the suffering he had endured, which he would not even wish on his enemy. He regretted the tragedy that had occurred, for it was not in his plans to bring the forest malaise. He expressed his condolences to the pilot's wife for the death of her husband. He notified his lawyer that he would give a considerable amount of money to his wife to support the children. He would henceforth help them. The court adjourned for sentencing. The verdict of the court is not guilty, for there is no corpus delicti. Severin to be released from custody in the courtroom. The courtroom greeted the judge's decision with a standing ovation, thus expressing gratitude for his fair decision. It often happens in life that a man has complete confidence in his beloved. Sometimes love blinds a man in love. He becomes deaf. He hears only his beloved. He just loves. The true man in love always has a pure soul, and no one is safe from a mistake. The same can be said of women. At speed, selling his apartment, Karditya Alexei Nikolaevich suddenly quit his job. Cutting all attempts to persuade the chief engineer, from the management and the shareholders, to stay and continue his work were unsuccessful. Alexei Nikolaevich explained quite simply, "Sorry, friends, but I cannot know I have to leave. Thank you all for your kind attitude toward me, but my decision is final." Everyone understood the real reason. Sincerely, they regretted the departure of a talented leader and specialist. Peter, as a friend, could not find his place. His faithful friend Alushka was leaving him. Alexei confessed to him, "Pipcha, do you remember our friend Shioga? We all went to military flying school at that time. Well, he got married and left for eastern Siberia with his wife. 6 years ago, His wife and son died tragically. You were out of town, so I went to his funeral alone. I helped him financially and supported him. It was an irreplaceable loss. He loved his wife, his son, and the baby she was carrying very much. Grief bent him. He stopped flying, quit his job, and went to the Taiga. He got a job as a ranger and to this day lives and works there. I found out his exact coordinates and wrote a letter. Unexpectedly, I received an answer letter from Suryoga. He is waiting for me. He wrote that once I helped him, now he will help me. Injured souls feel pain in the same way. Peter could not stand it. There were tears in his eyes. "Luch, how can I be without you?" he said. "We have been together all our lives." "It's all right," I replied. "Oh, come and visit us. We'll hunt. I can't stay here." I named the amount received for the sale of the apartment. I gave it all to Verena, the dead pilot's wife. "She's a good woman," she cried. She was sorry to see me go. She understands everything. I was unlucky by fate to be a woman. I will not test her anymore. I will buy myself some hunting equipment. Suryoga bought me a good gun as a present. Maybe I will work Suryoga, the huntsman. I'm telling you now, but I can't hear myself very well. I will tell how to live further. You know, Suryoga wrote in his letter that Taiga is the best healer for a bleeding soul. Taiga has its own laws, harsh but fair. But only there will I find peace and forgiveness. As the chance to start a new life was oddly enough given to me by misfortune. My friends embraced each other. But during the next day, Alexei flew away to the distant, but already so near and dear Siberia. The end. Dear listeners, thank you for watching this video.